Welcome to the deep dive. We're about to unpack a really compelling document today. It's called License to Fail, the Social Equity Trap from Nug Notes. And our mission, really, for this deep dive is to figure out why a program that started with, the best intentions, trying to fix historical wrongs in California's cannabis industry, why it ended up becoming this huge hurdle for the very people it was supposed to help. So we're going to dissect the key findings, look at some, frankly, surprising facts from this source. Think of it as a shortcut for you to grasp the complexities here. Okay, so let's set the stage a bit. The document talks about the genesis of social equity, how it grew directly out of trying to deal with past injustices. Remember back in 2016, Prop 64 passed in California. It wasn't just about legalizing cannabis. There was this really powerful vow tied to it to address the damage from the war on drugs.
That's right. And what's fascinating is how fast that vow turned into actual legislation. Senate Bill 1294, that was the real driver. It kicked off what everyone started calling the social equity era. And the promise was big, very ambitious, things like priority licenses, access to grants, a real shot at ownership for the communities hit hardest by old drug policies. It was definitely a legislative move with a clear goal to make things more equitable.
Yeah, on paper, that sounds incredibly promising, a real step forward. And the document mentions the state even handed out, over $95 million in equity grants? That's significant money. But given that strong intention and that initial cash injection, where did it go wrong? What does the document say about implementation or maybe unforeseen problems?
Well, this is where you really see that initial promise start to fray. The actual doing of it, the implementation, that got pushed down to individual cities and counties. And the result was, fragmentation, almost chaos, really. You had rules, who was eligible, even how committed places were to the program. It just varied wildly from one town or county to the next.
Wildly seems like the right word, doesn't it? The document points out, some cities really tried to embrace the mission, they got it,
Right.
But then others just stalled or misused the funds or even, kind of amazingly, sent the money back unused. So that fragmentation, it basically created this uneven patchwork, not the unified statewide approach you'd think was needed.
Exactly. It's a real lesson, maybe, in how decentralization, which can sound empowering, can sometimes be a fatal flaw for these big, complex social programs. It just splits up resources, accountability, ends up being a system that doesn't benefit nearly as many people as it should.
And then you look at the financial side of things in this document, and the picture gets, pretty stark. It talks about numbers like the average cost to build out a dispensary running $750,000 or even more. That scale of investment, that's a massive hurdle right out of the gate for any new business, let alone one trying to achieve social equity goals.
Absolutely. And then you put that number next to the support that was actually available. It just reveals this huge gap, this chasm. Remember those equity grants we mentioned? Most of them, often less than $50,000. I mean, that's barely a drop in the bucket compared to the capital you actually need to get a legal operation off the ground in this industry.
Yeah, it highlights a really crucial disconnect, doesn't it? Equity isn't just like opening the door. It's about giving people the means to actually walk through it and succeed. And if those small grants weren't cutting it, the document also says other supports like waivers for fees are starting to dry up now too. Plus, you've got these crushing tax burdens that just stick around, 12% to 35%? It really makes you wonder, how are these new equity businesses ever supposed to make it under that kind of financial pressure?
Well, connecting that to the bigger picture, the source describes the survival odds as, frankly, grim. When you stack it all up, those minimal grants against huge startup costs, then pile on high ongoing taxes, you have to question if the model itself was ever really viable for genuine empowerment. It almost suggests a system that was maybe unintentionally just set up to be incredibly difficult from the start.
And that immense difficulty, it seems, pushed a lot of these undercapitalized applicants into what the document calls the loophole trap, because they couldn't get traditional funding, right?
Yeah.
So many ended up in these predatory contracts, basically signing away control of their own businesses to silent partners just to get the cash they needed. And one detail that really jumps out is that some equity licenses were flipped, just sold off before a store even opened its doors. What does that tell you about the system's weak points?
It really reveals the sort of slow bleed that many equity hopefuls went through before they even had a chance. You look at cities like Los Angeles, for instance. The rules forced applicants to lock in real estate, which means paying rent, often big rent, sometimes for ages, before they could even apply for the license. Forget opening.
Wow. And there's a concrete example in here. Madison Shockley paid a staggering $1.1 million in rent while just waiting waiting for approval. Can you imagine paying that kind of money just to stand still?
Yeah.
It's like a perfect illustration of a catch-22. The very thing you have to do to comply with the rules becomes the biggest financial roadblock.
So it's really no surprise that many operators just couldn't sustain that. They folded before they even got a chance to launch.
Now, okay, it's not all doom and gloom. The document is fair. It does point out a few sort of rare bright spots. They offer a glimpse of what might have worked. Things like Oakland's incubator program or the Trellis project up in Humboldt. They offered shared space, which is huge, legal help, and importantly, capital that actually made a difference.
But, and this is really crucial, we have to stress, these successful examples were absolutely the exception, not the rule. They stand out precisely because they tackled those core problems head on: the money gap, the regulatory maze, the lack of real support, things most other local programs just didn't manage to fix properly.
And the numbers really tell the story, don't they? When you look at the overall outcome. By 2025, the data shows only 1,023 equity applicants actually became licensed operators. Just think about that number.
Yep.
That's only 36% of all the verified applicants.
Sure.
Less than half of those confirmed as eligible actually made it all the way through.
Yeah, and it makes you ask serious questions about how effective the whole program design really was. And in some areas, there's this really sobering detail. The number of inactive or surrendered licenses, it's now higher than the number of active ones. That tells such a powerful story about businesses just not being able to sustain themselves, or, tragically, businesses that never even got going.
So, circling back, what's all this mean for that original promise, that idea of social equity? Well, the verdict from this source is pretty blunt. It calls it equity in name only. Today, equity license holders, they make up just a quarter of all the operators across the state. And significantly, most of them are in cultivation. That's generally not as profitable as the retail side of things. The reality is many are in debt, most never even broke even, and some, like we said, never even got started.
Yeah, the document delivers a really stark final judgment here. It says social equity didn't just fail by accident. It was, and this is their phrasing, set up to collapse under red tape, underfunding, and local neglect. The intention, sure, it was there, the door was technically open, but only a very few managed to actually squeeze through all those bottlenecks, the regulations, the finances. The rest, tragically, they became casualties of reform.
Wow, what a journey we've just traced through California's social equity program. We started with such high hopes, didn't we? A promise really born from trying to fix deep injustice. And we end up with a system that, well, despite those intentions, seems to have unintentionally created brand new hurdles, maybe even tougher ones.
It really does. This deep dive, I think, powerfully shows a critical challenge in policymaking. When you have an initiative, one designed specifically to right past wrongs, but it runs into these huge systemic barriers like not enough funding, fragmented funding, just way too much red tape, inconsistent local buy-in, it can accidentally create new kinds of traps.
Yeah.
And it really makes you wonder, how can we genuinely make sure that policies, even the best-intentioned ones, actually create real paths to empowerment and success, instead of becoming, well, another form of unintended exclusion, or worse, something that drains the very people they're supposed to be helping?
That is a really profound thought to end on, something for you to definitely chew on. As you go about your day, maybe think about how these lessons, these patterns from California's cannabis industry might show up in other areas. Other social policies, economic development efforts, maybe even things happening right in your own community. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.